her teenage daughters who were very interested in other things other than taking care of dogs. So she said she was going to adopt out these dogs. So Wednesday night we went over and picked up the two Schnauzer puppies, one of whom is 2 and the other is 4.5. Chris, do you have the picture there anywhere? Okay. Well, the names, it started out as Cooper and Chanel, and we decided that's not enough. So he became Bradley Cooper, and she became Coco Chanel. So we now have Bradley Cooper and Coco Chanel as part of the family, and these two run around and they're just best of buddies and having a wonderful time. And so Kristen is home today. Somewhere back there is the picture of me holding Bradley and Coco. Oh, it went away. But anyway, that is the latest on the dog farm at the Hauber household. Well, anyway, it'll show up some. You guys got the idea anyway. So this is so we have 3 of our own, and then my daughter's golden retriever comes over during the week. We doggy sit during the week while my daughter works, and so he's 100 pounds, and Coco is about 10. And she goes toe to toe with him, just runs the roost. So anyway, speaking of chaos, our theme for today is chaos, crisis, and opportunity. And just judging by what I see going on in the world and in life around us, and sometimes life inside, I figured that chaos, crisis, and opportunity was a good theme to bring for everybody. And it's so nice to look out and see all of these familiar faces that are, now I'm going to say longtime friends, not old friends, but I'm going to say longtime friends, to be back with all of you, because I'm realizing that for a lot of us, we go back 30 years plus, right? It's at least that, isn't it, Mark? Yeah. So anyway, this is the Chinese symbol for crisis. It is also the symbol for opportunity or a turning point. So crisis and opportunity in the same symbol. So I can show you this afterwards, but that's what we're going to talk about today. And I remembered that recently and decided that, okay, so let's talk about that. And what you can see, there's a little bit of the very, very tiny font writing at the bottom. So that's kind of the fortune cookie version of this. So let me share with you what the fortune cookie part of this says. Crisis and opportunity. Opportunity is always present in the midst of crisis. The Chinese word for crisis carries 2 elements, danger and opportunity. No matter the difficulty of the circumstances, no matter how dangerous the situation, at the heart of each crisis lies a tremendous opportunity. Great blessings lie ahead for the one who knows the secret of finding opportunities within each crisis. Now, don't you want that fortune cookie? That's a good one. So it sounds a lot like something we should look at in light of what's going on in our world currently, isn't it? So let's look for a few things that we would put in that chaos, crisis, danger bucket and see what we can come up with if there's some opportunity in there for us to remember. So first off, let's do a little historical look. JFK was quoted as saying, the Chinese use 2 brushstrokes to write the word crisis. One brushstroke stands for danger, the other for opportunity. In a crisis, be aware of the danger, but recognize the opportunity. So like Brian was saying earlier, it's recognizing the light and the dark, the yin and the yang, in this case, the danger and the opportunity. Now, JFK, of course, navigated any number of crises in his life, both before and during the time of his presidency, didn't he? So while the Cuban missile crisis was going on, that certainly took the world to the brink of nuclear war, there was also that opportunity to push back on the proliferation that was going on at the time and take the world back from that brink to a more peaceful place, which is exactly what happened, didn't it? I was very young at the time, but my dad worked in military communications, and we lived in Hawaii at the time, and he worked on Oahu in that mountain that they had hollowed out to build planes in so that it would be impenetrable to bombs. The only problem is that they made the door getting out too small so that the planes wouldn't fit. So they turned it into a communications center. So he worked in this communications center in Hawaii at the time, and I think I was 2 at the time. And that was the communications center for the whole Pacific, and so there was a lot of activity during that time. So they had lots of stories about what was going on during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and that ability to be able to pull back from the brink of war. And it worked. So another historical perspective to share with you that's a little more current, but you'll probably remember this. Large-scale crises that challenge multiple interests and equities have a good way of pulling together diverse partners, allies and rivals alike, to solve a crisis. If nurtured, these relationships can be parlayed into cooperation in other areas. And see if you remember this. So, for example, Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. Iraqi President Saddam Hussein, heavily in debt from his war with Iran, invaded neighboring Kuwait in August 1990, claiming it for his 19th province. Sound familiar? Recognizing this as a violation of sovereignty and a challenge to regional allies, the United States, under the United Nations auspices, built and led an unprecedented multinational coalition of 32 partners, including the United Kingdom, Russia, Egypt, France, Saudi Arabia, and Syria, to expel Iraqi forces from Kuwait. Now, when was the last time that you heard of the United Kingdom, Russia, Egypt, France, Saudi Arabia, and Syria all working together on something in common? So by January of 1991, the coalition had destroyed the Iraqi military, liberated Kuwait, and thwarted Saddam's aims to bring Israel into the conflict. Remember all of the Scud missiles they were trying to fly toward Israel at the time? And to split the coalition. This is this hallmark of international cooperation, including between the United States and Russia shortly after the end of the Cold War, which was only a couple years before, stands today as the model for successful coalition operations. Furthermore, the Madrid Peace Conference, which followed the invasion, laid the groundwork for all Middle East-related peace processes since that time. So isn't it interesting how crisis, how something totally out of the box brings together people and nations in a way that wouldn't have been thought before? So how many times throughout history has chaos or crisis created an opportunity for exceptional change? That's what revolutions are made of. In the best way, that's what revolution is. Now, this is from someone named Hannah Ardent. She says, in moments of crisis, the important connection between danger and opportunity, remember danger and opportunity here, centers on their common source in a disruption of normal order, a disruption that entails instability and volatility, but also openings to previously precluded or unimagined possibilities for action. Unimagined possibilities for action. The moment of crisis is transient. In political matters, the statement's virtue is twofold, not only to manage or to seize a crisis situation, but also to recognize the situation when it arises and foresee its coming. By recognizing the crisis for what it is, a moment of decision, we can wrest that decision for ourselves. So we recognize that something's coming and we seize the moment and the opportunity in that. Okay, so I think that makes the picture, that makes the point about the bigger picture relationship between crisis and opportunity. So let's talk about the more personal aspects of it. So, has there been a crisis or chaos in your life, or even a danger recently that has affected you? Something in the macro, something in the micro, whatever it might be. And what opportunity have you seen or could you see in that? Look at that in your own life. Now, the crisis can appear in many forms. It can appear as a medical crisis. It can appear as someone's passing. It can appear as a relationship crisis. It can be a financial crisis. It could be a personal or even a spiritual crisis. There are many forms that crises show up in. What opportunities are available to us when those things show up in our lives? And what are you experiencing in that? And it may be someone else's crisis that is somehow affecting you. Anybody got that going on in your life? That to me, that happens a lot. It could be coming from a family member, from a friend, from a loved one, from a coworker, any number of sources. Now, the common element that I would hasten to point out is that crisis is stressful. It's something that makes us want to contract and protect. Just a very natural response. You know that protection kind of reaction that I'm talking about, right? But seeing the opportunity requires that we get beyond that contract and protect reaction and choose to have a different response, choose to see something else. So how about tools to deal with crisis? Let's talk about some tools for that. And this is a bit from a gal named Claire Wiley that was written during the pandemic in 2021. So pretty recent stuff that we're all familiar with, right? She says, the coronavirus pandemic is undoubtedly one of the most significant crises of our times. It has caused loss of life, unemployment, massive economic upheaval. However, we can't ignore the fact that the pandemic had some upsides. There was a fall in daily CO2 emissions globally during the lockdown. For example, and most importantly, people are now more aware of the seriousness of the climate crisis. There was a reduction in crime, in road accidents, and even in paper use. The Venice canals cleared up. Wildlife returned to cities, and companies stepped up their social responsibility. Education has been transformed forever, and volunteering has soared. Look at what has transformed here during the pandemic and since. We didn't have this going on before the pandemic. We didn't have the option of both being together in person and being online if we weren't able to be in the service together. It's really quite a transformation. And to be able to do that is seizing the opportunity in the crisis, isn't it? Now, you may not have necessarily thought of it at that time in that way, but that's exactly what's been going on. And she goes on to say, it can be difficult to see the silver linings during serious and catastrophic disasters. And yet, being able to find the opportunity in a crisis can have huge benefits for our mental well-being and personal lives. So here are her suggestions about what to do with that. First, sit with difficult emotions, just like Brian was talking about a few minutes ago. It's important to note that taking something positive from a difficult situation doesn't mean burying our heads in the sand or ignoring the dire reality of a situation. Unlike toxic positivity, isn't that an interesting term? Toxic positive. Oh, everything's fine. Well, get out from under the falling roof, but it may be fine, but let's definitely get out of the way of danger. Seeing the opportunity during times of crisis does not mean suppressing unpleasant emotions. You can and should acknowledge and process all your feelings when a disaster or a challenge happens. Seeing the opportunity means then reframing what the incident means in the story of our lives and what we might be able to do with it. We'll talk about that a little more here in a minute. Second, accept that crisis will happen. Accept that crisis will happen. You probably heard that very frustrating maxim about the only constant in life is change. Yes, it's true. Crises are unavoidable, whether it's in a relationship breakdown or getting fired or some illness. We will all face some kind of hardship in our lives. But adapting how we view and approach these struggles might actually allow us to turn them into something meaningful. Third, relish being pushed out of your comfort zone. Ooh. How about that? Relish being pushed out of your comfort zone. Change and growth rarely happen when we're comfortable. Mel Schwartz argues that being nudged out of our comfort zone is key to seeing opportunity in crisis. Transforming our career or our love life, for instance, usually takes a great deal of dedication and intention. Crisis, on the other hand, removes the self-motivating requirement as it places us squarely outside of our familiar zone, where the opportunity lies. Growth and fundamental levels of change only tend to occur when we're out of our comfort zone. Ever notice that? When we're in the comfort zone, everything's cool, and we're not likely to make the big changes. So we might look at crisis as a blessing in disguise, albeit an unwanted one. When was the last time you welcomed a crisis? Right? So Jerry Wind, an emeritus professor of marketing and warden and entrepreneur, Nitkin Rakesh, say that 10 times fast, who co-authored a book on transformation during crises, agree. They write, instead of viewing the present situation as a short-term necessary evil we should try to leave behind as soon as possible and return to a comfortable pre-crisis past, we should ask how to use the current situation to speed up long overdue changes. So how many times during COVID was there the sentiment of, I just want things to get back to normal, right? Just want things to get back to normal. Well, we've been cultivating a new normal all along, but it's not the way that it was. And that crisis, that chaos changed us forever. And if we look at it in some very good ways, just like we were talking about with the way that we use technology here. So, have you been meaning to leave your unfulfilling job, but you haven't been able to summon the courage? Maybe you've always wanted to write a book, travel the world, or run a marathon, but got too comfortable with your daily routine and put it off. Being forced to shake things up a bit might offer just the chance. Fourth, consider the big picture. Another critical aspect of turning crises into possibility is training yourself to think long term. Your current crisis is not ideal, but it is just one moment in time. Have you ever noticed that about the string of crises that tend to string together over time? So to achieve self-empowerment requires looking beyond the snapshot and envisioning what door of potential has just flung open. Isn't that a great visual? The door of potential that's flinging open in the crisis. Learning to look at the larger themes and patterns that set up these challenges will develop a vantage point from which you may break through the struggle. In other words, What are the recurring stories in your life? What is your participation in the storyline? Sometimes that shows up as, why does this keep happening to me? Right? And just consider that. What are the recurring stories in your life? Some other very difficult names, so I'm going to go with just the first names. Maria, Arx, and Adrian produced a report about turning challenges into opportunities for the Brookings Institute. And they write, to turn an existing crisis into an opportunity often requires reframing the problem or looking at issues through a different lens. If possible, allow yourself that picture, that perspective, and try to see the bigger picture. That reframing aspect. Fifth, change your perspective. At the heart of turning a crisis into opportunity is mental reframing. You don't have to ignore the reality of a situation, but you can change how you view it. Use the experience of being out of your comfort zone to seize opportunities. Remind yourself to see the big picture and the patterns in your life and prioritize your support systems. That all seems like really good stuff. Now, we can talk more in terms of the emotional response and how we work with the emotions to get in line with that we know, but that's a really good place to begin. Now, my observation over the course of my life has been that there are those who spend their time and energy foreseeing and avoiding crises and sometimes navigating through them. And then there are those who spend their time and energy manufacturing crises to gain some particular opportunity or advantage. Have you noticed this? This is true in the macro, it's in the micro. We can look at it in politics, we can look at it in family, we can look at it in all kinds of ways, but it's one thing to respond to substantial change or to crisis coming from outside in an unexpected way. It is another thing altogether to create crisis as a distraction or way to avoid change that's really needed. If you ever want an example of that, go watch the movie The Tail Wags the Dog with Dustin Hoffman and Robert De Niro. Really well done, comedic, tongue-in-cheek look at creating crisis as a distraction. Now, my judgments around this kind of stuff going on in politics and in the media just go wild, and we could have that conversation for a long time. But I think you get what I mean. My final point would be that sometimes we are confronted by genuine crises that we need to respond to in a good way. I think we all know that. And other times we need to respond that it is someone else's manufactured crises and isn't deserving of our time and our attention. And being able to know the difference is a really important thing, because it's very easy to get sucked into the vortex of crisis, isn't it? Yeah. So I'm sure we'll have lots of discussion on this, but in closing, I found a poem that I thought was really, really relevant to this that I wanted to share with you. So I invite you to use this for a moment of meditation. You can close your eyes if you like. This is called Blessing the Boats by Lucille Clifton. May the tide that is entering even now the lip of our understanding carry you out beyond the face of fear. May you kiss the wind and then turn from it, certain that it will love you back. May you open your eyes to water, water waving forever. And may you, in your innocence, sail through this to that. So hang out with that for just a moment. Open your eyes when you're ready. And thank you. Bless you. Namaste.